I really appreciate this hearing, um, especially because we're talking about really unacceptable disparities in social service spending for our neighbors in the United States territories. My question is to you, Representative Sablan. I want to highlight the human impact of these funding disparities because sometimes we get to talk about the numbers, but forget really to talk about the people behind it. And I know some colleagues talked about poverty and so forth, but if you can, Representative Sablan, if you can set the stage for me and my colleagues who maybe aren't so familiar with the Northern Marina Islands that you represent, can you talk about the economic struggles many of your residents are facing right now?
Sure. Thank you, Congressman, for that question. So in the Northern Marianas has been in recovery for, since at least 2015 from multiple major catastrophic storms. And before that, there were all these, and now, of course, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and the economy is basically at a standstill. But what COVID-19 has done is really expose these underlying vulnerabilities and these economic struggles that we've been dealing with in the Marianas for a very long time, and presented opportunities, we hope, to really correct in a permanent and lasting way the structural inequities that have been affecting the Marianas as well as our sister territories. We know what it's like to fall off these fiscal cliffs. In very recent history, in 2019, our Medicaid program ran out of money, and we had to come back to Congress. We've had to come back to Congress multiple times to respond to disasters and provide more funding for these programs that people really needed after a super typhoon. The whole island was devastated. And then there was no money for Medicaid halfway through the fiscal year. In 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, the governor slashed food aid to thousands of families. And we had to come back to Congress for funding for that program as well. And so, there are really dire impacts for people. The most vulnerable people in our communities are just driven deeper into poverty and instability when there are these disparities.
No, and I know how it can really create generational trauma as well. I did appreciate, Representative, that you highlighted veteran issues in your testimony. My office gets large portion of our resident casework are from our veterans in need of critical services. Can you talk about the unequal treatment from the VA to our Northern Marinas, veterans?
Yes, absolutely. And the Northern Marianas is really the only jurisdiction in the nation that lacks really basic access points for VA care. We don't have a community-based outpatient clinic. There really is no VA doctor. There's no vet center. And even just by virtue of where they live, the family caregivers of our veterans don't qualify for VA caregiver benefits because the VA doesn't provide the services, the basic services that would be required to administer the caregiver support program. Veterans in the Marianas, like veterans throughout the territories, have to get on a plane and travel many hours, in many cases, to access the VA care and the services that they need. So there are disparities in that area.
Yeah, Northern Marianas, you all have gone through much more devastation than what my residents went through a couple weeks ago with the historic rainfall and the impact of climate change. People's basements, city halls, one of my hospitals was completely flooded. I can't imagine, again, the families in Northern Marianas was going through, on top of all of that, the economic struggles have worsened because of climate change. Can you talk a little bit about that in that connection? Because I think we need to also do much more investment, not only in direct services and social services, but dealing with the climate issues and struggles within the Northern Marianas and the territories that continue not to get the investment needed to address that.
Sure. Being in the islands, we really are in many ways on the front lines of climate change. We're dealing with sea level rise. We're dealing with more frequent and severe storms. flooding and you know, as I mentioned earlier, we were just barely beginning to recover from one catastrophic typhoon, and then we were slammed with another that was even worse than before. And I think that we can expect this to happen, and we really need to be better prepared and better supported, and we need more federal investment to help us build a more resilient community.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Sablan, for your passion and your commitment to your residents. I yield.